In today's video, we're going to talk about living with PTSD when you are yourself a parent. If you've dealt with childhood abuse or neglect or adverse childhood experiences, going through a healing journey while you're a parent, good Lord, it's very difficult. And it's very easy to make parenting mistakes on the best of days. It's even easier when you are suffering from unhealed trauma or any severe mental illness. And this applies even if you don't have a formal diagnosis of PTSD. If you have severe depression or anxiety or any other mental health issue, this is all going to apply. Okay. And by the end of this video, I want you to have some powerful perspective around this issue to help you be the best parent you can be while you're still going through what can be a very difficult healing journey. My name is John, and in 2018, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD from childhood. And I'm here on this channel sharing with you everything I've learned, especially considering that therapy, though it saved my life, didn't have a lot of the answers I was looking for, and I just had to kind of scrape them together on my own. So if that's something you're interested in hearing more about, definitely subscribe to this channel. And ask me your questions in the comments so I know what you want me to talk about in future videos. Man, parenting when you have any sort of severe mental illness is rough. It is nearly impossible some days. And today, it feels like one of those days. Everything's fine, got it under control, but it inspired me to make this video. So it goes without saying, perfectionism, I mean, it just isn't gonna, there's no room for that here. Your job as a parent is not to be perfect. I think your job as a parent, apart from the normal stuff of like keeping your kids alive and raising them and teaching them how to be productive adults, is to understand the cycles that you were brought up in, to acknowledge them, accept them, confront them in your own life, and then try to pass on as little of that as possible to the next generation. To think that you're going to completely erase every ounce of generational trauma before it can get to your children, it's just not going to happen, right? However, your children can have way, way better lives, freer lives, not have to carry around the kind of weight that you carried around. They're still humans. They're going to have mental health issues of their own. Life is messy. Just do your best. Just do your best. And one day when your kids are old enough, you can explain to them, hey, I did my best. Some things snuck through, and you can have productive conversations with them as they're entering adulthood, beginning to take more responsibility for their mental health, their own well-being, their lives. As you pass that baton, part of that will be explaining to them, hey, here are some of the processes that I was able to halt or slow down. And you, as you move into your adulthood, here's some things to be on the lookout for. Some things I haven't totally figured out, or I didn't totally figure it out before I, infected you to some extent with my BS. That is so different than the lot that you were given, right? It's night and day different, right? It has caused me oceans of distress, how much I love my kids and how much better I want their life to be than mine was. But every ounce of my healing has come via acceptance and doing my best, doing good things, and then saying, hey, that's good enough. Good enough is great. Good enough is by definition good enough, and perfection is the enemy of good. So I guess I'm talking to people who put a lot of pressure on themselves to be great parents. Obviously, if you don't give a crap about being a parent, you're probably not watching this video to begin with, right? That being said, we do have blind spots, and I'd like to talk about what some of those blind spots are. So here's some things you really want to try to do or not do. The first thing you want to do, I think, is develop a poker face. Listen, your issues, your pain, you want to protect your kids from that. They're going to be able to tell what's going on with you at the end of the day. But there's so many situations where it's really nice to have a poker face. Like, I'm a coach, right? I help people get unstuck from whatever they're stuck in so they can live the life they want to live. I'm also continually going through my own healing journey, and this stuff is really hard for me. That's partly why I'm a great coach, is that it's harder for me than other people. So if I figured it out for myself, well, then I've got the tools that other people are going to be able to very successfully use in their own journeys. That means a lot of days when I show up to my calls for my clients, I feel like dog shit. So I take a breath, I switch gears, and I think of it more as a type of vulnerability, right? I'm going into this situation being vulnerable to how good things can be, even though I feel kind of crappy, right? And often the crappier I feel, the more I get out of those sessions, the more I can kind of listen to myself coaching someone else and be like, oh, that sounds pretty good, man. You might want to take some of your own advice. And I find that this is really true with parenting as well. There are so many situations where it would be inappropriate or counterproductive for me to emote on the outside how I'm feeling on the inside. I deal with a lot of chronic pain that's related to trauma, PTSD. I still deal with a lot of anxiety from time to time. getting fixated and obsessing about certain things. I need to set that aside and be very, very present to my kids and what they need at any given moment, whether it's helping them with an issue that they're dealing with, or whether it's just being present for family time, for quality time. So I'm not saying to just suck it up and swallow your problems and pretend that they're not there. You can do this while actually holding that part of you that is hurting, right? So often being present in ways that aligns with your values helps as you're trying to do that inner healing stuff, as you're trying to let go of the things that were imprinted on you in childhood and discover or rediscover who you really are and do that instead. Having that poker face allows you to be with the pain you're feeling and also expose yourself to a different experience. Be vulnerable to the moment. And this is how the challenge of parenting can actually help you in your healing journey on a personal level as well. With all these challenges, once you learn to meet them, you're going to be more effective at reparenting yourself and getting yourself unstuck from the old stories that have been running your life. Now, along with that, there's a lot of things we don't want to do. When you're not feeling well, you might think, oh, it'd be really nice if, my kid came and snuggled with me on the couch and, I might get some warm fuzzies from that. Listen, that's great. Like, that's a beautiful thing. But you want to be aware when you're leaning on your kids to meet an inner need, okay? Your kids are not there to support you. This is really important. Really, really important. Your kids are not your emotional support animals, okay? They are not there to alleviate your anxieties. Don't lean on your kids for your emotional support. When you feel that abject need for something on the outside, that's always a call to go inward, go toward that feeling that's hurting at that point, the part of you that feels like it really needs something or someone on the outside to give it love. It's your job to allow love into that space. And no one can do that for you. And this applies to, physical affection, hugs and stuff. It also applies to needing your children to look a certain way. Like if you're pressuring your kids to dress a certain way or succeed at sports, like this is all about you trying to feel good enough. And you want to be on the lookout for it. Don't lean on your kids. They're definitely not there for you to dump your problems onto. And not only should you not dump your problems onto them, you shouldn't share a lot of adult stuff with them at all. Let them be kids. You want to preserve that simple, uncluttered space to let their minds develop as much as possible in play, creativity, spontaneity. They can't do that if they're obsessing about your problems. Because if you have problems, this is the trick here. Yes, kids need to see their parents confront problems, face them. That can be hugely beneficial in how they grow up and do those things for themselves. But if you're always sharing your worries with them, and this is where you have to be careful talking to your significant other about things that you're worried about, your kids are going to basically hear, oh, mom or dad doesn't know how to deal with X, Y, or Z. And you are their attachment figure, right? You are their source of security. So they're hearing you say that you don't know what you're doing. It can rob them of that safe, nurturing environment, right? So life's going to happen. They're going to see it happen, right? That's fine. But as much as possible in your daily behavior, be mindful about what's coming out of your mouth. And whenever possible, if it's not practical to keep things from their view, try to show them how you are meeting your challenges proactively and according to your values, right? With acceptance. Because if they see you complaining, whining, and just generally pissing and moaning about it, that's not going to inspire confidence in them that you're a secure attachment figure. But maybe you're thinking, John, I have crippling PTSD. My kids can clearly see that I'm not mentally totally well. There's some things that are really obvious that are different about our household than other households. Yes, let's talk about that. So for me, I don't talk to either of my parents. I have removed one parent from my life entirely. The other parent, I still will allow to see my kids if they want to. So my kids have a relationship with their grandparent, but I no longer have a relationship with my parent. And ever since I removed myself from that toxic parent, I made sure that if my kids were going to have a relationship with them, that toxicity would not get passed down, right, to them. Basically, I know that there's referees around to make sure that everything's on the up and up. And when my kids would ask, why don't you talk to so-and-so? Part of my brain wanted to just be like, well, they I mean, let me explain it to you. Let me tell you all the terrible things that this person did in the past and continues to do. But I would always just hold my tongue, and eventually they stop asking, and it becomes normal, right? Well, I mean, I did answer them in some way. I wanted to like acknowledge their question, but also not get into the nitty gritty of it, right? And as they get older, I'll be able to explain a little bit more about why that is, but only as they're mature enough to be able to take that information on without it negatively impacting them in any way. When will I do that exactly? I don't know. I'm curious. Like, when do you think kids are old enough to understand the things that happen to you? There's certain things that I'm never going to tell my kids that happened to me, right? They just never need to know. But at some point, I probably want to share with them why I made the decision not to engage with my parents anymore. To complete that loop for them, to answer that question at least enough. I'm thinking maybe when they're in their, later teens, but I don't know. I'm curious what you think. So another thing that's different about our family is that my kids see me going to therapy, right? They used to see me going to pretty intense therapy. Unfortunately, my kids have seen me in some really sorry states, having nearly psychotic panic attacks, things I really wish that they never saw, but there's nothing I can do about that. So my kids were really little when I got diagnosed, and the only way I could explain to it was just telling them I was going to the brain doctor to get my brain fixed. And that seemed to convey the general idea of what I was doing, where I was going. And they're like, okay, he's going to the brain doctor. And that didn't seem to worry them that there was something wrong with my brain. They're just like, whatever. They were like, 4 or 5 at the time. And even though they're much older, they're old enough to know what a therapist is or a neurologist. We still jokingly say, where are you going? I'm going to the brain doctor. There are going to be days that you would give anything to take back. There are going to be moments, mistakes, giant F ups, just giant, inexcusable F ups. There are going to be things that you can't do that maybe other parents could do. There are going to be activities that you can't show up for, even though you would like to, but you're just not ready yet. There are going to be times where you have to choose your peace over something that maybe would be good for them. There are going to be times where you have to look after your well-being, and you're not going to be able to do all the things that you wish you could do. And that's going to apply to everything in life, especially parenting. How you respond to that is super important, because if you struggle with mental health, if you have a PTSD diagnosis, or if you are just chronically stuck in life, shame probably plays a big role in your inner world. And when you are screwing up as a parent, and it's like really obvious to you, like, hey man, my kids would probably really like me to be at their soccer game, but I can't do it today. That would cause more harm than good. It's the easiest thing in the world to feel totally ashamed about that. And it's really easy for that shame to just completely spiral you out, and then to kind of spill over into all the other things on the inside where you don't feel good enough and you feel like a giant piece of crap and you feel like you can't do anything right and nothing ever works out for you, and all these stories that have been going since childhood. It's the easiest thing in the world to let that happen. But what I would invite you to do is, ask yourself, what good comes of it if I get worse? If I fall deeper and deeper into the delusions that I'm already peppered with? It doesn't help, right? If my state right now is due largely to the lies that have been running my life that were installed via abuse and neglect in childhood, then continuing to be an asshole to myself is not going to help. You have to accept that if you aren't being the parent you want to be, then the parent you want to be is on the other side of your continual healing. And you're not going to be a jerk to yourself and somehow continue to heal. It's just not going to work. Your healing, so much of it is learning to love yourself instead of shaming yourself, learning to accept instead of reject. So on that day when you're on the couch with a migraine or something and you're not able to go to the recital or whatever it is, or if your illness has impacted your income and you don't have enough money to do something that you really think your kids deserve and you feel guilty and ashamed for it, you've got to accept, okay, this is what it is today, right? I accept this situation as it is. It's not what I want, but it's reality. And if I want my life to get better, if I want to get to that place where I can go to all the soccer games and my income is better and I can do all the fun things, then I have to take my healing seriously. And that means I need to be there for myself. I need to advocate for me. That voice telling me that I'm a piece of crap and all that, no, no. I remember why I'm here. I didn't put myself here, right? The actions of somebody else are what caused all of this, right? And I need to accept what they did and that it had nothing to do with me. It was all about them and their narcissism and their selfishness. You're going to have to remember the reason that you're so mentally unwell is because when you were a child, a powerless child, somebody who should have fucking known better didn't protect you or went out of their way to hurt you. And so, whatever limitation you're dealing with in your parenting, if you accept what's going on, it leads you back to the truth. And it maybe that's a truth that you probably need to be led back to a few times before you can fully accept, right? And this is why all your issues as a parent, all your imperfections, if you let it be about, okay, I have to be perfect and my job as a parent here is to be perfect, that's all a giant distraction from your actual pain, which has very little to do with soccer games today and a lot to do with the things in your past that you're still having a hard time accepting. Because when you fully accept what happened, it demolishes the lies that you've been carrying around ever since. All the lies that are running your life and keeping you stuck, those all have to do with how we've learned to survive after those events. It's casting everything in our life in the shadow of what happened. And it's actually acceptance that's going to help us remove that shadow so we can step into the light, fully be present in reality, and have the healing we deserve for ourselves and for everyone else around us. So when you run into your limitations as a parent and you feel that shame pulling you down, that's when you lean on the self-love and the acceptance hard. Those are some of the lowest moments. And that's when you decide, okay, am I on the path to healing or am I going to go on the path toward re-traumatizing myself again and again and again? Okay, so now let's talk about when your kids are the trigger, when your kids are inflaming everything inside of you. This happens to the best of parents with the healthiest of brains. Their kids can still drive them nuts. It's definitely going to happen if you have unhealed trauma. Now, this differs depending on, why you have PTSD or why you have mental health issues. But for a lot of people with complex PTSD, they became parentified as children. They had to grow up too fast. Their parents did not provide a space of safety and nurturing for them. This is often because parents were addicts, abusive, neglectful. There's a whole bunch of ways that it can happen, but where you as a kid ended up feeling responsible to take care of your parent. And you felt like you had to make sure they were okay for you to be okay. If it was your responsibility to make sure your parent was functional so that you would have a caretaker, right? This is very, very messed up. And this is why I would go into panic attacks just with my kids doing the normal, like toddler, 4 or 5-year-old screaming, crying about a bunch of nonsense. I would have a severe, like couldn't breathe, thought I was having a heart attack. It felt like I was dying when they would do stuff like that, just being kids. And one day, this clinician just said to me, well, it's because your kids are your parents. And I was like, huh? And he drew this very clear line by saying like, yeah, your kids are a trigger to you because your parents always acted like kids when you were growing up. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it really helped me to understand that for me and everybody else who deals with complex PTSD, there were a lot of situations growing up when your parents were not acting like fully formed adults. So when your kids act up, just doing normal kid stuff, you don't just see it as an adult parent watching a child be a child. When you have PTSD, that part of your brain doesn't really care about time. It doesn't care about now versus then. It doesn't really distinguish between that. It gets triggered and it's emotionally time traveling. You're just trying to get kids ready for school and they're flipping out about something. And all of a sudden, in your mind, through no choice of your own, right? Something you have no control over, all of a sudden your mind is flipping back into that childhood state where the disorder and chaos being caused by your parents was a threat to your essential well-being. Now it's just a threat to you getting to school on time. But this is where it's really important for you, if you're noticing that your kids are acting up and it's causing extreme stress for you, to recognize, oh, this is not me as a parent being stressed out about what little Billy is doing now in this year. This is about me as a child being stressed out by a parent who was acting like a child. And that can help you be more present. It can help you calm yourself down. You put on your poker face, be more vulnerable to the reality of the situation. When I'm putting on a poker face, I'm not talking about like just repressing things. I'm talking about, okay, I'm going to hold space for this upset feeling on the inside, while on the outside, being very present to the situation, breathing, staying in my body, staying in the room, and reminding myself that, hey, everything's fine. This is now, it's not then. You were parented by people who were doing this, this, and this, and staying grounded enough to live out your values as a parent in the moment, right? You can get little Billy to school, get him to wear clothes, bags packed, out the door. And if you're a little bit late, it's not the end of the world. Nothing's life or death. It's all relatively chill. One foot in front of the other, life goes on, that kind of stuff. So much can improve in those highly stressful moments of parenting when you just remember this is a child and it's triggering something in me from when I was a child because my parents acted like children. When you have those moments, those stress triggers that remind you how awful it felt to be a kid for you, the next time you're catastrophizing about what a terrible parent you are, remember that feeling of feeling powerless to help your own parents or feeling powerless to stop them from hurting you, and appreciate the gulf, the massive gulf between how you were parented and how you're parenting now. Yeah, we're here, we're talking about how to widen that gulf as much as possible because no matter where you're at, there's probably things you could do better. We're here to be better. The fact that you're watching this video means you give a shit. You care and you're spending your time. You could be doing anything else. You're spending your time trying to get better. That says everything, right? So we're ending the cycle. And part of that is how we treat ourselves. We're not here to excuse our bad behavior as parents. We're going to continue to hold ourselves to a high, high standard because we love our kids and we want the absolute best for them. And we want those cycles to end. However, we're practical. We understand that I'm not going to stop a freight train on a dime all at once. When I screw up, I'm going to pick myself back up. I'm going to remember, hey, the emotional context behind my screw up, that was about then. My opportunities for being the best parent I can be, that is a real opportunity in the here and now. And I can access that if I stay grounded. If I lose myself to shame, I'm not being grounded. I'm not being present. I'm not actually doing anybody any good by beating myself up after the fact. This is how we continually fail and learn and fail and learn, right? You're not going to become the best possible parent you could be without falling down. And if you are losing yourself to shame, you're not going to be able to learn from your failures. That is the only way we learn anything, is through failure. So you have to have grace for yourself along with your high standards. And you need community. So let's continue the conversation in the comments. Say hi, drop me a like if you appreciated this video. Let me know if you have videos you'd like me to make in the future. Let me know the topics that interest you or the questions you have. Thanks, and I'll catch you next time.